It's great to welcome to the program today Joseph Stiglitz, an economist, professor at Columbia University, and Nobel Prize laureate. He is author of the brand new book out today, The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society. It's so great to have you on. I really appreciate your time today.
Nice to be here.
Well, one of the most interesting things, there are many interesting things in the new book, but one of the interesting things are the perspectives you present about how the concepts of freedom and liberty, particularly in an economic context, can be interpreted. And there is an ideological right wing around the world and in the United States that interprets freedom in the context of cut my taxes so I have the freedom to decide for myself how my money is spent, or cut regulations so that as a business, we can do whatever we want and allow only the market to assign consequences, for example. Can you talk a little bit about how that framework of freedom actually represents a limitation on freedom for other participants in society?
So let's begin with the basic concept of what we mean by freedom. It's really freedom to do what you can do, your opportunity set, as we would put it more formally.
Yes.
Somebody at the point of starvation has no freedom. He does what he has to do to survive. He doesn't have much choice. Somebody with a lot of income has a lot of choice, a lot of freedom. So that's the basic framework. Then I make two further observations. One is that your freedom, what you can do may contract, may have an effect on others. So your freedom may result in the unfreedom of others. As Isaac Berlin, who was a great philosopher at Oxford, said, freedom from the wolves may be death for the sheep. And we see that over and over again. Freedom of the exploiter is bad for the exploited. Freedom to pollute means those who have asthma may die, a really more fundamental right than anything else, the right to live, or may have to spend more money and time in the hospital. You can see all the negative consequences. So
Yes.
in our urban, modern 21st century world, so many of the things that each of us does has effects on others. And the second idea that's I think also important is to realize that a little coercion can actually expand freedom. It sounds like a contradiction, but just think of stoplights. A stoplight is a form of coercion. You can't cross the street without getting across the intersection when there's a red light without getting a fine. But without those stoplights, there would be gridlock, especially in my city, New York. So no one can move. So a stoplight is a little regulation that expands what all of us can do. Now you take that same idea to the question of, in a modern 21st century society, we need public investments for roads, for infrastructure, more generally for education, health, and basic research. If government had not done the basic research for mRNA, we might not be here. We would have been still suffering from the COVID-19.
Yeah.
But if your government is going to do that, you're going to have to pay taxes. And the nature of this is that they're going to be free riders who aren't just going to voluntarily contribute. So it has to be a form of compulsion. So a little compulsion can make us all freer in a fundamental sense.
If we zoom out a little bit, just to frame the conversation, my view in studying economics and in looking at different models is that the best we've come up with for modern societies right now is a model sort of social democracy, Northern European type capitalism. And it is capitalism. And the idea here is we're setting a floor so no one's standard of living goes below a certain level. And as you have more and more money, increasingly those top earners are taxed such that we ensure that we put this floor in place. that's the system I've seen that leads to the most, what I might call, just outcomes and maximal freedom for everybody on average. Where do you fall in terms of economic systems?
I agree with you, and the book calls for what I call a rejuvenated social democracy. I refer sometimes to progressive capitalism. What I do is I emphasize a little bit more uh, trying to create a diversity of institutional arrangements, co-ops, not-for-profits. We're moving more and more to a caring economy where you have older people like me. You have a lot of children, sick people, a lot of people needing care in one form or another. And what we've learned is that too often the for-profit model doesn't work very well for the caring economy. You can too easily exploit older people, people with dementia. You can just take advantage of them
Mm.
and maximizing profits, which means maximizing taking advantage of them, is not the way we want our society to function. So part of my idea is you have to have this kind of rich ecology, diversity of institutional arrangement, and encourage that.
I'm curious about your view, if you follow it, and if you're not following this, totally fine. I'm curious about your view about the degree to which, on the progressive and economic left, the predominant model is what you and I are sort of saying we're behind and what you lay out in the book, or if you're at all concerned that maybe some of the economic models that are being loudly championed, and I say loudly because I don't know that they're actually the most predominant. I just think they may be championed by some loud individuals that are much further left, that are actual, not used as a slur, but actual socialism or state communism. Do you think that there is too much of a push for that? Do you think it's healthy for there to be a push for that to some degree, even if it's not your end goal? How do you contextualize the conversation on the left right now?
Well, we've had some experiments with that, you might say, extreme position, and for the most part, they haven't worked out very well.
Mm.
I have a discussion in the book about this notion, evolution versus revolution. And revolutions, unfortunately, destroy the fiber of society, and it's very hard to recreate it. So what I call for is the maximum speed of evolution
Mm.
that we can get. So I'm very sympathetic with the view that it's not going to be a little tweak of the system that's going to repair it. It's not a little bit more education here, a little bit more green bonds in the financial market there
Right.
that are going to repair our broken system. So you need a lot. But I do worry that if you destroy the fiber of the economy, you wind up with what is happening so often, and you actually don't succeed in creating the kind of just and prosperous society. One of the things I was going to add to your comment about the social democracies, what I call rejuvenated social democracies, is not only do they have a high level of prosperity, they have a high level of well-being.
Yes.
So it goes beyond material prosperity and shared prosperity. It's a sense of security, a sense of being able to flourish and being creative, and they've been very successful in the kind of aspiration of the good society that should be our objective. It's not more goods for higher living standards, which means enabling people to live up to their potential.
In your model, in your view, what are the areas of society that you think should be taken out of for-profit markets? I mean, often healthcare and health insurance is one that's often stated. public education. Most people agree with having one military run by the government, people on the left and the right. What are the sorts of areas that in your model you would take out of markets?
Well, you've named three of them. Obviously, I mentioned before the care of the elderly, the broader sense of the care economy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that one of the things that I emphasize that to make society work, you need checks and balances. And systems of checks and balances require an active fourth estate, an active diverse media. So here's an area where in the United States, I think we need more. I think we need to have an independent public broadcasting in the form of BBC or the Swedish system, where they've actually succeeded in getting an independent media. I think it's a little bit worrisome, and I spent some time in the book talking about this, to have so much of our media controlled by very wealthy people. They're setting what I call the meta-narrative, the way we see the world, the neoliberalism that dominated for 4 decades. And we need to have some check against that, and a check against abuses, not only in government, but by major corporations.
Mm.
And we need a media to say where there are gaps in our society, holes that need to be filled by someone. So that's an area where I think we need more active government involvement than it's been in the United States. But it has to be done well.
When you talk about evolution rather than revolution, certainly you're talking about not being an accelerationist in terms of break it all down to build it back up. Lots of my audience will agree with you on that, but where they may have a question is, do you believe that the level of evolution that's needed could possibly be ushered in by the Democratic Party of the United States, or is it going to take something outside of that? Is the Democratic Party a good enough steward of the vision that you outline?
I think it is. If we had a different structure of our government, if we had a kind of parliamentary system that many European countries have, one could argue, let's create another party,
Yes.
and that party would be part of a coalition and would pull the coalition more in the direction that I'm advocating. But the structure of our government, result of our Constitution, is a two-party system. Very hard to have a third party break in. Never, only been 1 or 2 instances where it's had a significant effect. So that means that we are probably constrained to work within the Democratic Party. And right now we're lucky. I think a majority of the people within the party are on the progressive side. And I think, I know a lot of people who are more, you might say, in the middle and the right side of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
They're beginning to understand the progressive vision. They're beginning to understand that neoliberalism failed, and many of them were advocates of a variety of neoliberalism. Looking back in history, Clinton looks like some people say the high point of neoliberalism,
Right.
but it certainly moved in that direction with financial market deregulation. We all know that that was a mistake, and the Democratic Party has fixed that. It accelerated trade liberalization without the necessary support. I think Biden now recognizes, and the center of the Democratic Party now recognizes, that was a mistake. So I think the party has recognized that its embrace of neoliberalism has led to, contributed to the state of our economy, society, where we are, which is not a happy one. And so we need more than just a little tweak. Now, you were making a comment about a lot of noise on the far left. There's also a lot of noise of some people in in the center of the Democratic Party
Mm,
that is unhappy about the the progressive moves. They were unhappy when I was in the Clinton administration, and Bob Reich and I were articulating our concerns about inequality.
yeah.
But I think they've been marginalized, and the result of their marginalization is that they're raising the uh, decibels higher because that's the only way they think that they'll be heard.
That's an interesting observation, and one that I think is no doubt true if you pay attention to the texture of the discussions that's happening, for sure. The book is The Road to Freedom: Economics and the Good Society. We've been speaking with the book's author, Professor Joseph Stiglitz. Really appreciate your time today, and congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you so much.